This is AOS Shorts. Get better fast. Hello and welcome to another episode of AOS Shorts. In today's show I've decided to do something a little bit different, mainly thanks to the amazing help of local Master of Death Tim Lind. As part of the Legions of Nagash release, and before we all get swept away with Daughters of Khaine, I wanted to record a show on Nagash, his lore, background and the mortal realms. Nagash is a pillar of Warhammer, so we could easily have hours of in-depth coverage, but I'm going to try to stick to AOS Shorts form and distill his story into a show around 20 minutes long. The first half of the show is background. It tells the origin of Nagash from the world that was through to the end times. Given it's an ancient history for those living in the mortal realms, this part is told as a saga. The second half of the show is more descriptive, and lets you know the main Nagash story from the Age of Chaos through to Malign Portents. This experiment is part of my aim for 2018 to expand AOSshorts.com into a resource for all of Age of Sigmar, including lore and background summaries, book reviews, articles, and hobby tutorials. It's a lofty goal, but I have some great people who have already offered to help. If you're keen on writing a page or so on your favourite Age of Sigmar topic, then let me know. It could be a good fit. The project's a work in progress through the year. Please drop by the site and let me know what you think. Is the page layout intuitive? Are we covering all the major topics you're interested in? What more would you like to see in order to help new and established players understand the scope and depth of the mortal realms? In terms of the rest of the podcast, I have plenty of tactics and strategy content lined up as well for the coming months, including the return of masterclass shows with top UK and US gamers. In the last few weeks, I've also added an international Age of Sigmar tournament list archive to the site, where you'll find tournament packs, lists and analysis from the biggest events in the US, Australia and New Zealand so far. The archive will be a complement to the Bad Dice archive, which covers the major UK tournaments and will hopefully be useful for those wanting to gain inspiration or to scope out the meta. Anyway, let's start with the saga of Nagash. Even the gods have beginnings. The Dread Master of Shaiish has origins in a long-destroyed world, in an age before time. And yet, there are those who remember them. There are the few, members of an empty pantheon, ancient in their own right, but whose memories of that time are well guarded. And there are the many, the souls of those tormented, oppressed and destroyed under the tread of the great necromancer's monstrous ambition, who linger yet in the deepest catacombs of the numberless underworlds of Shaiish. It is with them that answers can be gleaned, for those with the tenacity and bravery to seek them, and those with the nerve to listen to the tales they have to tell. Such tales have but one origin, the land of ancient Nehekra, where the second son of a third dynasty monarch usurped his kingdom and his gods over a lust for power and a forbidden union, corrupting the religious and superstitious rites of his own death-obsessed culture with an ill-gained knowledge of dark magic, harnessed from the very winds that covered the world. Nagash secured the loyalty of disaffected noblemen and military officials, plying them with an addictive, life-extending elixir that granted them power, at the cost of dependence and obedience. The most loyal of these was a wastrel son of a minor lord, who saw in Nagash a second chance at a life wasted. Arkan found new purpose in his service to the usurper, an unshakable bond that could survive even the end of the world. Together, they took the throne of Khemri. As his cult continued to refine their control of the dark winds, the tyrannical reign of Nagash soon became decades, and then a century. An enormous black pyramid was erected from blocks of black warpstone and the mortar of 1,000 slave corpses. Not to honour the glorious dead, like the monuments of his predecessors, but to draw the winds of magic to Nehekra. Gradually, this colossal arcane locus killed the land around it. For the other priest-kings of Nehekra, this was one crime too many. They allied together against Nagash, and in a decades-long war, managed to kill his black lieutenants and sack the Black Pyramid. Vowing vengeance, he fled north through the desert, and passed from the world of the living, but Nagash had transcended death. His magic-infused body refused to untether its final shackles, and he had at last become immortal. He explored the South Sea region, discovering a motherlode of warpstone, and using it to enhance his studies into dark magic. Without the limits of a normal lifetime, he pushed the use of magic in ways the mortal races seldom achieved. Experimenting on the local tribes during this time, he became the first and greatest practitioner of necromancy. And as the centuries passed, he transformed the region into a land of death, building the great fortress of Nagashizar with his new labour force. As the land changed, so did his body, and Nagash became a towering, monstrous sorcerer lord. Rat men from the Underkingdoms laid siege to Nagash's new stronghold, eager for the vast warpstone riches within. After decades of warfare and entire generations of Skavens spawned and slaughtered for this cause, the great necromancer struck a bargain with the Verminous Council of 13, and an uneasy alliance was forged. Slowly, Nagash's attention settled once again upon his former homeland. An invasion was launched from along the coast. Skeletal ships delivered legions of walking dead to the southeast, where the defences were weakest. Several of the royal lines of Nehekra were revealed to be under Nagash's sway, as they had experimented with the dark knowledge they found in the Black Pyramid. A war unlike any other on the face of the world was fought, the dead against the living. As the living died, the army of the dead grew. However, thanks to the charismatic Prince King Alcadizar, Nehekra was united, and Nagash's war of attrition ultimately failed. Furious, Nagash unleashed a punishment worthy of the most spiteful of tyrants upon his foes. His Skaven allies poisoned the river Vitai, decimating the population of Nehekra. When he next marched upon Khemri, he was unopposed. Alcadizar was hauled back to Nagashizar and made to watch as the great necromancer's final plan came to sinister fruition. The resurrection of an entire continent, men, women, children, all his to command. An army he would use to conquer the living. Nagash would learn much of betrayal in his long life. However, it's possible that his first was the greatest. His Skaven allies, fearful in the wake of his resurrection spell, released Alcadizar and armed him with a blade, mighty and lethal beyond description. Nagash was cut down in his moment of supreme triumph, his remains burned and his artifacts of power scattered. But Nagash had transcended death. It took millennia, but his body finally reincorporated within his Black Pyramid. He awoke to a different world. The armies he had risen from the dead refused to obey. Travelling north, he discovered Nagashizar overrun with Skaven, his massive warpstone reserves depleted. In order to regain his lost power, he journeyed further north in search of his artifacts and found his crown in the possession of another charismatic warrior king. And oh, how he hated charismatic warrior kings. This Sigmar had united the tribes of men into an empire, against which Nagash once again made war. He almost succeeded in killing this new rival, but was undone by the potent dwarfen weapon wielded by the warrior king, and was once again banished to a millennia of reconstitution. This time, Nagash ruled from beyond the grave with the patience of a god. He manipulated world events through his many puppets until he deemed the time was right. His plans had to be accelerated with the advent of a new Everchosen, a chaos champion with the power and ambition to threaten his own existence. Guided by his unseen hand, Arkan had gathered his staff, sword, crown and armour, and in a mighty ritual he was reborn. This time his power was greater than it had been for over 2,000 years, for he had incarnated within a massive portion of the winds of magic, the amethyst wind, Shaish. Time, he sensed, had grown short, and even this amount of power was not enough. Nagash made his final return to Nehekra and destroyed it, utterly. He saw what remained of his people's gods in the underworlds, and devoured them. He sought the god seed of the dwarven god Valea, and devoured it. Even this was not enough to halt the tide of darkness on the horizon. Preservation was ever Nagash's ultimate goal, and this time circumstances dictated an alliance with the living. In what would become the final stand in the survival of his world, Nagash stood alongside gods and kings, enemies old and new, and lent them the last of his power. But the souls of those tormented, oppressed, and destroyed under the tread of the great necromancer's monstrous ambition were many, and betrayal was ever close at hand. The incarnates failed, and the world at last was lost. However, Nagash had transcended death, and even the gods have new beginnings. After the cataclysm of the world that was, it was Sigmar who first came across Nagash's shattered essence, buried under a mountain cairn in Shaiish. The god king Sigmar freed Nagash. Nagash joined Sigmar's pantheon and took responsibility for protecting Shaiish from chaos. Since that day, Nagash has laid claim to all of Shaiish, the realm of death. Through this age, civilizations thrived. Nagash tolerated their existence and maintained his marriage of convenience with Sigmar, while pursuing all the other gods of death and consuming them. In his mind, all souls belong to Nagash as the rightful god of death. Souls are what has granted Nagash his formidable powers, and are the resource he uses for his macabre creations and weapons of war. Elf souls are particularly powerful and blaze with potential, but were almost completely consumed by Slaanesh in the end times. Nagashizar is now, again, Nagash's capital, the centre of his power, a foreboding, shadow-shrouded necropolis that echoes the screams of tormented souls. A fortress city of looming spires and twisting, mist-shrouded alleys populated by the risen dead. Cathedrals of bone and vast underground mausoleum palaces. No living creature can approach its walls, as it radiates dark magic that would wither flesh in an instant. Its creation was made possible by the discovery of vast deposits of Shaiishan realmstone at the far edge of the realm of death. Gravesand, sand of time, mortis ash, pure crystalline death, or amethyst magic. Nagash directed the construction of colossal inverted pyramids constructed from vitrified gravesand, which float in the skies about Nagashizar. These pyramids are beacons for dark energy once more. Then came the invasion of the Chaos Gods. Sigmar's pantheon fractured as his members pursued their own goals. Nagash sought his own power. Gorka Morka revelled in war. Alariel retreated into the glades of Gyron. Tyrion treated it with indifference. Malarian sought to subvert it, and Grungni retreated into exile, believing his people's hope rested in their own autonomy. How very dwarfish. Nagash abandoned Sigmar at the Battle of the Burning Skies, where the forces of Chaos won a climactic victory. The Shaiish Archway is taken by Chaos. Feeling betrayed, an enraged Sigmar hunted Nagash across Shaiish and began the War of Heaven and the Underworlds. The great necromancer proved elusive, however, and the war only served to deplete the strength of both former allies. Sigmar withdrew, his hunt ending in a futile stalemate. Meanwhile, Archaean had seized the all-points in Sigmar's absence. As Sigmar withdrew from Shaiish, the Ever-Chosen began pouring his own forces through the All-Gate, and so began the War of Bones. Also known as the Barrow Wars, the conflict fought between Chaos and the Legions of Death raged on for centuries, and the Legions of Nagash were forced back to the deepest underworlds. At the gates of Nagashizar, in the Battle of Black Skies, Archaon the Ever-Chosen cut Nagash down in an eruption of necromantic energy. His armies collapsed, and Nagashizar was toppled and left a burning ruin. Only a desperate counterattack by Nagash's Mortarchs drove Archaon's forces back long enough to recover Nagash's remains. The undead forces retreated to the forgotten underworld of Stygites. Nagash's consciousness was shattered, and it took centuries for him to regenerate his lost powers and physical form. When Sigmar's Tempest swept out from Azir once more, Nagash emerged from the Starless Gates, and death magic swept across Shaiish. As his consciousness unfragmented into cogency once more, the chaos forces in Shaiish were dragged down one by an unending tide of bleached bone and grave-worn steel. In a sense, Nagash is a part of Shaiish, and Shaiish is a part of him. Invading armies like Nurgle's Knights of the Fly faced a hostile environment that literally haunted their every step. When Nagash's wandering consciousness, which up to now had been harnessed by his Mortarchs in defence of the land, finally coalesced once more into singular purpose, Shaiish fought back in earnest. The 8 black iron keeps around the ruins of Nagashizar were torn down, and the Chaos Lords crucified on the city's walls to spend eternity in spirit-searing balefire. Since then, Nagash has spurred all requests to join the wider fight against Chaos, and instead concentrated on consolidating his plans for Shaiish. He even went so far as to actively sabotage Sigmar's attempt to regain the Allgate by leaving their anvils of Heldenhammer to assault it unaided, condemning them to defeat. To further his ends, Nagash has dispatched agents across the mortal realms searching for clues to the true nature of the Stormcast Eternals, and to investigate reports of other souls disappearing from his grasp. With Chaos pushed back, the reconstruction of Nagashizar occurs at pace. Millions work to that end. Neferata and Manfred have been dispatched to the inner lands of Shaiish on vengeful crusades against Chaos. Arkan raises new inverted pyramids, using hordes of undead servants to collect gravesand from Realm's Edge, trails of endless marching ants carrying the precious resource, grain by grain. Now Nagash seeks to claim his revenge by bringing his war to every corner of the mortal realms. The Mortarchs have been unleashed. Neferata's blood cults and vampire covens have infiltrated all of Sigmarite society. The Azir-born Gestalt dynasty in Anvilgard, the Pale Prince of Hammerhall, the sanguinary choir of Excelsis. These intriguers, assassins and spies pave the ways for the Legions of Blood. Manfred's Legion of Night descend on mortal armies in bloody ambushes, wiping out frontier towns and fortified outposts overnight. Kalcheza burns. Voltisgrad is a skeleton. The twin fortresses of Crowfeast Peaks are strewn with corpses. Manfred has evaded all pursuing Stormcast forces sent to combat him. Arkan and his favoured black disciples seek forbidden knowledge, looting ancient tombs, hidden library cities and arcane repositories. Armies pour into Olgu. With the pieces in motion, Nagash prepares for his intricate and devilishly cunning plan. The coming moves will see the result of thousands of years of preparation. Confident of his impending success, Nagash has dispatched spectral heralds, the Knights of Shrouds, to the inner sanctum of nations he deems suitable to serve him. Those that accept are marked with the Necrocene mark, a magical brand that ensures their soul is given to Nagash at the end of their days. Their fate is set to Nagash. A dark solstice has dawned, a season of discontent that has cast its pallor over the realms, referred to as the Long Helsnacht or the Hexensent in Shaiish, the Ash Smother in Akshi, or the Glimmerdun in Kshamon, or simply the Time of Tribulations across the free cities. Death waxes ascendant. The time is coming for Nagash's final reckoning, an era of vengeance that will remind all traitors and pretenders who truly commands the spirits of the fallen. So ends the saga of Nagash up to the current day. There's been a lot of great coverage of Nagash in the wider Age of Sigmar community. Some of the best content is included in the show notes. I put links to review and commentary shows from the Great Mortal Realms podcast, the excellent Fjordhammer shows, and a number of Megor Miniatures reviews on the relevant books. So I highly recommend you check them out. As I said at the start of the show, you could spend hours and hours talking about Nagash. In fact, to such an extent that Tim compiled a rather comprehensive bibliography, which I've also included in the show notes. As always, you can contact me through this site, AOS Shorts on Facebook, or for the quickest response on Twitter at Antipodean7. I'd love to hear from you. We've also got a competition running over on Twitter at the moment for a free new inbox set of realm gates. All you got to do is follow me on Twitter, retweet the relevant tweet with your favourite AOS Shorts. Tell me your favourite stories, whether it's a bit of strategy or tactics advice, an epic battlefield adventure that you once shared, or a lore snippet that just absolutely captures your imagination. As long as it can fit in a tweet, it's fine. Content is going to be opened through to the release of Daughters of Khaine, which is 3rd of March. So keep tweeting, let me know. Really interested to hear from you. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Be interested to hear what your feedback is on this show and whether you want more lore shows like this in the future. If so, get in touch, let me know. Anyway, enough from me. Thanks very much. Bye for now.